are going to be talking about authenticity and grounding to your foundation, embracing the richness of who you are. And I'm so happy to have you all joining us today. This is a semi-interactive discussion. So as we go through the slides, I invite you to take a pen and paper and work through each of them with me. And I invite you to share, if you're comfortable with that, as you discover where you are. I'm going to spend a moment giving a little bit of background about me. I am an empowerment and leadership coach, and grew up. My corporate upbringing is in the financial services industry. I spent over 2 decades in leadership in the financial services industry. And today I'm going to ground this presentation with one of my own experiences. When I entered the financial services industry and leadership, my goal was to achieve that illustrious, exceptional rating. That was my goal, and that's what I wanted to do. And I found myself looking to others to figure out how to make that achievement. And oftentimes I was told, oh, you got to hit this number and hit that number. And I would go to my review at the end of the year and I would not achieve that goal. And then the next year I would take in more information and do what people told me, and I did not achieve that goal. And after 3 years, I was frustrated because I felt like I was exceptional. I felt like I deserved that. But with that frustration, I found that I took the time to say, okay, what is it that I want to do? I've got to just scrap all of this information and figure out where I want to go. So the activity we're going to go through today is kind of grounded in that experience and how I took that goal and all of that information, I scrapped it, and I just said, look, here is where we're going to go. So get your pens and paper out. We're going to start working through this activity. And I imagine you will find it very helpful in grounding and reconnecting to who you are. The 4 steps we are going to take are, we're going to talk about descriptors. We're going to talk about values. We're going to talk about what we enjoy and then finalize it with what we will not tolerate. And as we go through each of these activities, I welcome you to share, what you write down about yourself. If you're comfortable with that, it just makes for very rich conversation. So let's talk about descriptors. And descriptors are adjectives that you use to describe yourself. They can be adjectives that others use to describe you. And I invite you to, as I'm talking, to write down 3 adjectives that either describe you or that you want people to use to describe you. So as I was examining this experience, and man, I couldn't hit that exceptional rating. It was frustrating. And I started to think, what is it that I want other people to see about me? How is it that I want to lead my team, my family, and everyone around me? What are those words? And one thing that kept coming up for me, when I think about, Karina and I were talking about our upbringing and how that influences you. One thing that was absolutely certain for me is I wanted people to see me as kind and open for other people. So kind is a descriptor that I absolutely wanted to make sure I was projecting. In my leadership growth at the time, and even now, I wanted to be seen as communicative. I wanted to be a great communicator, whether it was to my team or whether it was to senior leaders, but that communication piece was really important to me. And lastly, the adjective that I wanted to be described as inspirational. I had people's careers in my hand and I wanted to inspire them to do things that were comfortable for them, that made them happy. And those would be the three descriptors that I chose to take into where I wanted to go at the time. It was a little bit surprising because in that environment, that corporate environment, it was all about numbers and that never came up for me as far as what I wanted people to see. I'm curious if anyone is interested in sharing what three adjectives describe you.
Yeah, I'm happy to share if so.
Yes,
Yeah, may I or anybody else?
yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so I would say resilient, creative problem solver. But this all come because of the challenges that I've had in my life. So I can relate to your communication as well, because this is again one part of what I'm all about as well. But I've discovered that it is one it's it's a desired thing, but one cannot apply it all the time. Anyway, I will stick with resilient, creative problem solver. Mm,
Yeah, great descriptors. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
thank
Anyone
you.
else want to share the descriptors that they are coming up with as they're thinking about how you want to be described?
Hello.
And you, yes,
Hi. Um, so I made a distinction between how I wanted to be seen and how I figured people see me. So
yeah.
I chose knowledgeable, supportive, and team player. I know that's maybe not really an adjective, but um,
No, I think you're spot on. It doesn't necessarily have to be an adjective, but I mean, well, team player, I think, is something that we want to be seen as, or we do see ourselves as. And my question for you is: you said you made a distinction between how people see you and how you want to be seen. Which do these fall into?
probably how I think they see me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And is there a difference between how you view the way people see you and the way you want to be seen?
Well, I loved the word inspire that you chose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think, if you can be inspiring or charismatic, I mean, you can persuade people to go along with you.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's important. And I think that's, probably something to work on. I think of the current environment that I'm in, and, I have ideas and I try to articulate them. And maybe it's just a shortcoming of the organization, not shortcoming, but just an inability of the organization, maybe at this time, to implement some of these things. But you'd love to have more traction sometimes when you present things. So um, I see inspiration or charisma as maybe a way that you get people to listen to you. But then going
Mm-hmm.
back to what you said about communicating, if you articulate something logically, maybe you can convince people from that angle as well.
Yeah. And I want to invite you to consider, as you ground yourself in who you authentically are, if inspiration is something that you want to have people describe you as, then tapping into that authentic part of you that is inspirational, or if there is a certain way you want to inspire people. For example, you know, I I want people to be inspired to absolutely be free with who they are authentically. But if, especially in your work environment, there is something you want to inspire people to do specifically, I invite you to take that descriptor and add it to the way you want to be described. Um, the reason for that is, if inspiration is what you want to bring into your repertoire and have people think of you, then that is a word you can use in your communication. For example, and you might go to a presentation or a meeting or be in a room with colleagues, and things that you find inspiring, you would point them out and say, "Oh my gosh, and thank you for sharing that. That was inspiring."
Mm.
And what that does is it starts to really cement that descriptor to you
Uh,
in A, what you're looking for, or two, how you want people to think of you.
that's a nice tip. Thank you.
You're absolutely welcome. Is there anyone else that's interested in sharing their descriptors? I invite you to do that in the chat, or if you want to get on camera and share, that's absolutely okay too. So if you're just joining us, what I invite you to do is write down the 3 adjectives that describe you. And we will be using this a little bit later on. So whether they're adjectives, as we talked about with Anne, that you feel people see you in that way, or adjectives of how you want to be seen, either one of those will work for this activity. Um, thank you, Anne and Karina, for sharing with the group and being so vulnerable this morning. The next thing we are going to talk about is our top values. And I really want you to go deep here, because sometimes what we thought our values were are not necessarily what our top 3 values are, or we start thinking in our head this list of 20 different values, things that are important to us. But when we think of our top 3 values, it is things that are immovable for us. So we may think that, work ethic is a top value. We find, though, that when we're made to be given a choice between work and doing the right thing, or integrity, integrity wins out. So I want you to kind of really start to weigh what these top 3 values are, and figure which ones kind of really go into the top for you. Um, I talked about how I really wanted that exceptional rating. And I found that I was leaning into values that weren't important to me. I really never cared how many widgets we got. That was never important to me. But I was leaning into that value because I was told that's what we should do. Really, I it kind of came down to me, to the value of kindness. And when it came to work, I also valued joy, because we spend 8 hours together at work, and I really wanted to make that a joyful experience. However that worked out, whether it was with clients or whether that is with the relationships and communications that I had. So really, that value of joy was so high for me. as well as the value of kindness. And when I started to lean into that value of kindness, it made my communications better. It made the way that I achieved the widgets or numbers a little bit different. And I also found that I wanted to lean into the value of discipline. So those were the top three values that I identified that were going to kind of take me through. Um, and I want to share a client story, which is interesting, but it will kind of help you to identify what value is most important to you. And when I asked this gentleman this question, he unequivocally said, I know it sounds bad, but my top value is money. And I said, well, that's interesting, but why do you think that's a top value? And he began to share that when he was young, his parents nearly lost their home. And so he went out and went to work and started um, building financial security, and he gave his money to his parents and helped them avoid that tragedy. But for him, he really associated money with it was an important value. And we talked about that there isn't any shame in that being a value. That is okay. So I say that to encourage you that no matter what your value is, being honest with yourself about that value is really important as you move forward. Um, so I'm curious, as we're talking about that, if anyone is interested in sharing, what are your top three values?
Happy to share.
Yes, Karina, please.
Yeah.
That would be great. Yes.
So, based on my personal experience, because values, you could say that they don't change, but they do change depending on many things in
Yes.
life. So, at this moment in time, I'm looking at fairness.
Mm.
I'm looking at an empowerment, and I'm going to put two. I'm going to it's collaboration and money. I'm going to give you four.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, Karina, because we tend to feel like there is a judgment in valuing money, but when we think about why that's important, there is a little bit more behind that. Like my previous client, he never wanted to be in that space again. For some people, money is, it's important because they want to achieve something. They want to use that money to achieve something that's important to them, whether it's a vacation or maybe going on a trip to Romania. But I'm curious for you, when you think about money, how does that value kind of set for you?
Sure, I'm going to give you. It's a very good question, and it comes after a very traumatic experience I've had with my previous job, in my last job. So
Mm-hmm.
that was all about, because something that I love working, in events, or event organizing, exhibitions, and so on. It's wonderful. It's a very high power type of event, long hours, no weekends, and so on. So I I stayed in the job not because of the money. They were not quite a lot, and I accepted not to be paid on Saturdays, Sundays, bank holidays, and so on.
Wow.
So I accepted all of that because I love the job. But but I was also bullied, severely bullied in that thing. So
Mm-hmm.
my lesson, it's a very harsh lesson. It is yes, you can enjoy the job, but the price you're paying is really high, and you should put money, in a way, money first, and plus fairness, collaboration, empowerment. I think that
Yeah.
because otherwise you can be, I'm just going to say one more word, you can be very easily bamboozled in the thinking, oh, isn't it great? We are working together. Of course, come Saturday, Sunday, everybody's coming Saturday, Sunday. We all go, but you're not going to be paid. So it's normalization. It's a very devious thing which is happening. It's a normalization of the abnormal. You're even so that's why I think that it's a very important point. Money, it needs to be on the table. I've learned my lesson in a very hard way, because nobody thinks about you.
Yeah, and I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing that story, because oftentimes we equate money with our worth, and when people take advantage of you and don't demonstrate your value, or they are having you work without being paid, that is really important. And I think for all of us, being able to say, I have worth and I have value, and I'm not going to allow you, my company, or I'm not going to allow there to be circumstances where that value is not honored. And so I appreciate that. And I do think that, there is this pressure to say, oh, I don't want money to be important, or I do it for the purpose, which is true. However, there is a value of being paid what you're worth, and money is something we need to move forward. So thank you, Karina, for sharing that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Anyone else want to talk about values, or is there a value that's kind of highlighting for you, or create, like, just coming up for you as we talk about this?
I'll contribute, although
Yes,
I would love to hear from others on the call.
of course.
I thank Karina for sharing that, because it brought to mind during my working career, in observing other employees, that sometimes when you telegraph that you have a goal, like I want to get to a certain pay grade, I think it actually changes how people, your supervisors, even the organization, see you, because they know that you're perhaps dedicated to doing what it takes to get to that level. I was a slightly different employee, I think, because among my values, I think integrity was very important, that I be seen as an honest broker, and I liked people to operate in an honest fashion. But when it came to my job, I like to play to my strengths. I got real joy when I was doing a job that really highlighted the talents that I felt that I had, and that I got to employ. And another thing for me is the sense that I'm adding value, that the work that I'm being asked to do, ideally playing to my strengths, is something that is valued by the organization.
Yeah.
But this whole conversation has really helped me remember, though, those employees who maybe had a slightly different agenda, let's say. And sometimes an organization, they need to know that this is where you see yourself one day. And if you're honest about that, and you say, I would like to get to this particular level, what do I need to do to get there? Assuming that you're doing the job that you're, hired to do, they may appreciate that clarity, and they may help you take the steps to move forward.
Yes, and you are spot on there. And part of the reason it's so important to identify our values is that we can identify when those values are in conflict, right? So, in both of your stories, if your value of integrity is in conflict, and you relate that value to something that's important to you, it helps in communication. So, if you're in a scenario where you start to be uncomfortable, you can identify and say, I really feel that your words made me feel like I did not have value. And when you can get to that part of the conversation, boy, those communications go quick, right? So you think about, oh my gosh, I'm annoyed, I'm uncomfortable, that meeting was awful. But when you can attribute that to your values, and in both of your stories, to say, I feel like you took advantage of me because I didn't get the financial gain on those working those Saturdays, then the conversation becomes infinitely more powerful and goes more quickly, right? Because you can identify that values conflict immediately. And when you say, oh my gosh, I wanted to feel valued, and what happened in this scenario made me feel like I wasn't valued, the power of being able to do that and connect to these values is really important. And I thank both of you for sharing. And I want you to know that I know that it feels like we want everybody to share. Where people are in their comfort level is where it is. And I want everybody to share too. But for you, sharing helps other people to identify and move to their values. So I am eternally grateful for you all doing that. Is there anyone else that would like to share their values, either in the chat or vocally? Well, let's move on to the next piece, which is, what do you enjoy? So I want you to think about, and it does not necessarily have to be three, but if there is something that you enjoy doing, I absolutely invite you to think about what those things are. And it becomes important because oftentimes, we go to work and we're focused on making goals or doing work. But in those scenarios where, let's say, you want to get a promotion, being able to connect to others by really looking at what you enjoy is important. So when I think about things that I love spending time with family, and that connection point often is universal. A lot of people like to spend time with their family. I also, interestingly enough, I love gardening. And I transitioned from the Pacific Northwest to the South in Texas, and the whole endeavor is different in Texas than it is in the Pacific Northwest. And one thing that you can do in Texas that you can't do up there is grow oranges. So, and citrus fruits. So for Mother's Day, 5 years ago, my husband got me an orange tree. And that was, I was excited. I couldn't wait to try my first orange. We planted the tree, and then we had flooding, and then we had cold weather. And then this poor tree, we had to build a fortress around it to try and get it to deliver us oranges. It was a big deal, but I loved the process of doing it. And after 5 years, we finally took our first orange off the tree, and we sliced it and we ate it. And it was the most joyous experience to be able to do that. And we learned so much about taking care of the plants. We learned so much about sacrifice, going out in that cold weather and covering that sucker up and making sure it was okay. But if you think about the points of communication, you probably notice that when I talk about raising this orange tree and I share the joy of slicing that orange, my energy is different. When you talk about things that you love and you connect in ways that connect to things that you enjoy, your energy is so different. I don't care what it is that you love. My son right now is on this Pokemon journey. There's this game, he connects to people, he goes out, he collects Pokemon and he helps people do that, and it also attaches to fitness because they're out walking all the time. But when you hear him talk about it, that energy is divine. And so, really naming those activities that you love and reminding yourself that this is where the connection point is, and this is the way that I connect to people. It's amazing. And maybe that connection point, that energy and connection leads them to share things that they love, no matter how silly, no matter how frivolous they seem, but really kind of identifying the activities that you enjoy is important. So spending time with family, gardening, and then also for me, inspiring people to grow and learn in the business world are really the things that I love the most. So it's an important piece, but I'm curious, as I'm talking about the things that I enjoy, what things do you enjoy? And you can put it in the chat or you can share with us vocally. Either one is good.
I can definitely share if
Yes,
nobody. I mean,
please.
I can start. I can break the ice.
Yes.
So much. So I love. I first of all, I'm jealous about on your orange tree. I'm absolutely jealous. I have to tell you, because one of my dreams is to have an orchard, a lemon orchard, and with olives and the oranges as well. So there you are.
Mm-hmm.
Very jealous.
Yeah.
What makes me feel alive, I would say, it's writing. I love writing. I love writing my stories from the childhood, growing up in a different country. I'm actually now writing my memoir, let's say, my autobiography, and I adore that because you can bring so many stories within that. You can bring literature in it. You can bring habits, culture. It's just very diverse, and I'm passionate about this.
Yeah.
I'm also I adore painting, and I love intuitive painting. And because of that, I love sharing. I used to have classes and support people in order to finding their voices through painting.
Mm.
And it's absolutely amazing when you see somebody sort of coming with a back hunched and all gray in the face and leaving the class after that with a back straight and with a huge smile and hands full of paint, but and again and on the clothes as well, but feeling alive, feeling good about themselves.
Yeah.
So that's really, and it is still one of my passions, and God willing I might do it again in the future. And also I one of the things that I love, it's building relationships. So I love meeting people. I love listening to their stories, and I love doing that while walking. So I love this sort of walking with friends or walking with people who I just meet occasionally, and we sort of do this sort of a campaign, like a companion, like a Sputnik. The Russian have a word Sputnik, which Sputnik means a companion, but it's a companion you can be for a day, an hour, and just share and grow, because you can grow a lot even in 1 hour. So I adore the sharing of ideas and inspiring people and being inspired.
Nice. Um, I I invite all of you to take note of Karina's energy shift as she talked about the things that she enjoys. There is a beauty in sharing things that you love and making those connections. Sputnik, I love that word choice. But even as you talk about writing and doing these things that you love, it sparks an energy that is shared among people in the room. And it really allows people to connect to you and feel heard and seen as you share these things, and invite other people to share things that they enjoy as well. The identifying things that you enjoy is all about putting yourself into the space of sharing your most abundant and joyful energy. And that is really, really a wonderful gift to give to others who may enjoy the same things, or even if they don't. When you are exposed to someone's positive light, it creates comfort, it creates warmth, it creates connection, and it's a wonderful gift to give. And somebody, oh yeah, Anne loves writing too.
Oh, how lovely.
Tell us more, Anne.
Okay. I was really struck by the energy that you pointed out, Kristen, as Karina spoke. And I would say that the things I enjoy are writing, and I love learning new things through research and just talking to people. And then I love sharing what I know. And right now I'm a docent at an art museum. So I'm not an artist, but I have really enjoyed learning more about the artist whose work is at our museum. And what I've found is that a lot of the people who visit the museum, they know about this artist, and so they share this interest. And there's nothing like having a conversation with someone who's as interested in a subject as you are. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right, Anne. But not only as interested in a subject, but people gravitate towards you because they want to learn, they want to grow. And one thing I say often is the universe unfolds exactly as it should. And so, interestingly, two people on this call, willing to share, who are both so incredibly passionate about writing, the universe couldn't unfold any better. It's how interesting that we are here where we are today. That is lovely. And the whole purpose of identifying what you enjoy is really all about energy and putting yourself in the best energetic place that you can be. So that is wonderful. And as we talk about energy, the next slide is really about identifying what you will not tolerate. And I want you to think this through, because this is interesting, because people always come up with lying, right? That, oh, I will not tolerate lying. That is not true, because if I lie to you about liking coffee when I don't really like coffee, so that we can go have coffee together, that lie is not going to be something you will not tolerate. You might think it's silly, or you might not want to, you might, whatever it might be. But I want you to really dive into this with behaviors that you will not tolerate. So when people say they don't like people who will lie, it is, I want to know more about that. Like, if it's coffee, no. But if the lie harms another person, then that's where the line is drawn, and where you have that no tolerance rule, right? And this is something I've done, this authenticity workshop so many times, and I've heard so many different things, and I have really thought about, for me, what is it that I don't tolerate from others. Now, I asked for two behaviors, but for me, there is only one behavior that I will not tolerate. And I don't like when people are mean to one another. I don't like when I don't like when people lie. I don't like when people blow me off. I mean, there's lots of things that I could start to put into this category. But when I start to examine, why something happened and get curious about why the behavior occurred, the truth is that what I will not tolerate is behavior that is meant to intentionally harm another human being. So, regardless whether it's a lie, regardless of whether if you blow me off and it's because you had a family emergency, okay, that's great. We can communicate, we can understand it. But once I find that your behavior is meant to intentionally harm another person, that's where I draw the line. So I want you to kind of really think through that. And the purpose is, as we were talking about before, when we have a values conflict or when we have something that makes us upset or builds up our emotions, is it us, or is it a behavior that really is something that we don't want to deal with and we want to set boundaries around? And it just kind of helps identify that for you. So if I get curious and I say, oh my gosh, you said something in the meeting that made me question integrity, and I'm curious why this happened, and then I find out that the intent was, well, I don't like that person and I wanted them to be uncomfortable. I'm ready to set some boundaries here and talk about it. So I'm curious, as I say, the behaviors, what is coming to mind for you all?
What you were describing is sort of bringing back some memories of, let's say, disruptive colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what their intentions were, but sometimes they can put things out there, whether it's in an email or in a meeting, that can, I don't know, maybe it is critical of something that you've done, maybe, and if their motives aren't pure, let's say, if it's not to getting to a better solution, but rather to make you look bad or something, that's really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I'm sensing that you would want people to be empowered somehow to address that.
I absolutely would. And it really comes down to curiosity. Why were you disruptive in the meeting? What were you trying to achieve? And so I do absolutely want you to be empowered. It doesn't mean though that you have to say it out loud. But it does mean that I want you to be empowered to set a boundary. So, if
Hmm.
disruption is something that causes discomfort for you, then you might at the beginning of those engagements say, I want people to respect one another. Interruptions are really not how we're going to get to our end goal. So, can we all agree here that we will listen until someone is done talking? And when you are talking, make sure that you land your plane and keep it to one or two sentences so that we can get through the meeting. Because it may be, Anne, that I was disruptive because Joe was going on and on and on and on, and I felt like he was going to take up all the time. So getting curious and learning and deciding, where your boundaries are so that you can be productive is important there. Whether you say it out loud or whether you don't, it may be that Joe is disruptive all of the time, and where Joe can't be is at a dinner with friends because he's too disruptive. So I'm going to elect not to bring that into these meetings or these dinners that I plan, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was reminded of something that a supervisor told me once about a particular colleague who, let's just say, had a sort of abrasive nature. And what my supervisor talked me through was maybe some techniques that I could use where, you just can't address everything that happens. And sometimes you just don't want
Yeah.
to, but sort of preparing yourself to not let it in and not take it on board.
Yeah.
Like she actually had this exercise where you sort of visualize that maybe you've got a shield that's up and the things that are said are just sort of bouncing off the shield.
Mm.
And just by visualizing that, sometimes it helped.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with you that using visualization in those moments where you don't have a choice to be with some, I mean, you sometimes just don't have a choice. Those
Right.
people who are having these behaviors you don't want to tolerate, and that's a great tip to
Mhm.
just visualize that because I imagine it helped you through those scenarios. Yeah.
It really did. Sometimes you have colleagues that you have to tolerate them. And it may even be known by folks that they just have a tendency to, maybe always want to shine a light on themselves or, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And you have to sort of find some what would you call it, self-defense techniques or something so that
Yeah.
you're not taking on board negative energy that is going to disrupt your day or plans or happiness. um, I think it's really key to to learn how to deal with and that the person I'm thinking of, I would term them a brilliant disruptor. They had, they had some amazing skills and but yet they had a an abrasive personality. So,
Yeah.
organizations will sometimes tolerate people like that because they are getting, some amazing contributions from them. So
Yeah.
then those of us who are there have to find our own strategies for dealing with the situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and thank you again for sharing. I appreciate that. Y'all are helping really define the purpose of this exercise.
Good.
Um, and what we do with all of this information is we create an authenticity statement. So you are going to fill in the blanks. So the first one, I am Kristen, just you. I put your name there, right? And then the next sentence, you're going to add those descriptors. I am Kristen. I am kind. I am communicative and I am inspirational. I value kindness, joy, and discipline. I love to garden, spend time with family, and focus on growth and learning. And I will not tolerate intentional harm. So, as you're putting this sentence together, the purpose of this is when you're going into different spaces, I want you to reconnect to this authenticity statement so you can go in ready to be authentic. Even in like one of those meetings where this person is coming and he's going to be disruptive, connecting to this authenticity statement will help. And really using it to your advantage. I would write it down, and I've had clients that keep it on their computer or keep it somewhere they can see it and kind of reach back toward it. So if we kind of go back to that time when I really wanted that exceptional rating, when I connected to who I was authentically, And I took this energy into my work and I stopped focusing on what people told me to do. I know I didn't even really care about getting the exceptional rating anymore. I just wanted to be who I was and create this wonderful environment. That very year at the end of it, when I was communicative and I focused on inspiring others, I got that exceptional rating that very year. So it was amazing the difference because I was a completely different leader and I remained true to myself and other people could see who I was and what I was about. And that made all of the difference. And I'm curious, if you would be open to reading your authenticity statement to us. If not, it's okay, but I'm just curious.
I can do that, sure.
Please.
So I'm Corina. I'm resilient, creative, problem solver. I value fairness, collaboration, women empowerment, and money. I will not tolerate abusive behavior.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Anne, are you willing to read yours for us?
Well, I'm not sure I can remember everything. So let's see.
Okay.
So I am Anne, and I am, I can't remember what I said before. I'm knowledgeable, supportive, and a team player. And I value integrity, playing to my strengths, adding value where I work. I love to write, learn new things, and share. And I will not tolerate, I'm going to say abusive behavior.
Yeah, yeah. And you were spot on in your descriptors because I had written them down. You remember them
Okay.
perfectly. Anyone else want to share their authenticity statements in the chat? Corina, I invite you to share your Substack if you would like to, if there's a link you want to share,
Yeah.
just so we can check it out for you.
Oh, that would be lovely. Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
to go for
yeah.
this. Yeah, and I would love feedback. If anybody sort of likes to leave feedback, it would be a pleasure because, yeah, I would like to see whether it is interesting for people or not. I mean, yeah. Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to put it right now.
Yeah, pop that in the chat. I invite all of you. There is a QR code that you can use. Please feel free to rate the session. And of course, if you want to connect for coaching, I'm happy to do that. There are so many. I try to do at least, I do 2 sessions each month. But I try to keep those up there, and I certainly do invite you back. And before we close, are there any questions or any